Good morning, distinguished Director Ma'am, respected Registrar Sir, esteemed colleagues, and dear students. I am Miss Vaishnavi Sharma, your host for the day.
Hello and good morning. I'm your co-host Iqbal Singh.
I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar session on how to read a room presented by Miss Prachi Bali. Ms. Prachi Bali is National Head Client Partnership and Business Head North at Foxy Moron, which is founded in 2008. It is a leading independent digital product and service agency. The agency solutions towards building future-ready brand on digital through an integration of content, technology, and media using data-backed tools and practices. With team across Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi NCR, and Dubai, the highly awarded agency has built several sustainable partnerships with L'Oreal Groups, Netflix, Colgate, Amazon India, Burger King, Scandix, OBL Tiles, Huawei, ABC India, Turner International, and DAMSC, amongst others. Ms. Bali did her bachelor's in management studies from HR College of Commerce and Economics and master's in marketing communication from University of Westminster. Ms. Bali joined Foxy Moron Mumbai as account manager in 2013, where she rose rapidly through the rank to the position of account director. She worked across the beauty, edutech, Eclobev, and lifestyle chain categories over her tenure. In 2016, she moved to Gurgaon as one of the agency world's youngest business head north to spread agency business in the region. Over the past 3 years, Prachi has grown the business 6 times in northern market. Her experience spread across categories such as FMCG, electronics, BFSI, manufacturing and entertainment to name few. Ms. Bali expertise across different verticals in digital have landed her the tile of being great brand filter within the ecosystem and also paved the way of her taking to role as national head client partnership in addition to her ongoing responsibilities. At the age of 20, Ms. Bali co-founded a social entrepreneur venture called Project Chirag, which provides solar lights to underprivileged villages in India without any access to electricity. This college project has been running successfully as an NGO for the past 10 years. Under Prachi Bali's leadership, Foxy Moran Delhi executed some memorable campaign which received multiple awards. Now, I would please request Ms. Prachi Bali to please take this webinar forward. Ma'am, please.
Hi, thank you so much, Vaishnavi. That's a very kind introduction. Thanks for having me here today, everyone. And I don't know if you all work on Saturdays, but thank you for being here on a Saturday. I guess student life is this way is better. When we look at work life, I think we treasure Saturdays more than anything else. So because Monday to Friday, there's not really any end time to our day. Um, but yes, thank you for having me. I'm hopefully going to be doing something which is quite simple to understand, but just interesting to look at. There are a lot of things that we take for granted in life, especially when it comes to communication. And my hope here today is, given that the bunch of students that we have on the call are across different verticals of education and background, they're doing different courses. I didn't think it would be fair for me to do something which is marketing specific, because that's not everyone's degree. And since they're hopefully going to be getting into the corporate world very soon, and looking at different opportunities and jobs and further studies, etc., across the ecosystem, I thought it'll be good and interesting to talk a little bit about how you can read a room. So, by reading a room, what I also mean is that not just how you present yourself, because that is something that a lot of people talk about, but also to interpret from how other people are presenting themselves in a room, because that should change your dynamic and that should change your conversation as well. So I have a short presentation. It's quite simple and basic, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions after as well. I'll just present my screen. So yes, I work in a network of agencies, which is called the Zoom Media Network. We're a 12-year-old. Our first company, Foxy Moron, which is what I belong to, is a 12-year-old agency. Zoom Media as a network, we have 7 agencies under our network. Just a quick introduction to give context of where I'm coming from and what is it that we do. Um, we run a full funnel digital agency under Foxy Moron. What I mean by full funnel is it goes through all stages of the marketing funnel, right from creating awareness about a product or service to getting consumers to purchase the product or service. So it's a full funnel end-to-end digital agency, and we provide 360 services across creative and media across the board. The second agency that we have is called Doinoink Consulting. It's a transformative business consultancy, and it believes in digital transformation. It works with different startups and family-owned businesses and other companies who are trying to either get into the digital ecosystem and need a specialized consulting service in order to how do you learn to conduct your business in the digital environment. That's mainly what Doinoink Consultancy does for us. Next, we have Polin. Polin is an influencer, creator, and talent agency. What I mean by that is we do influencer marketing on behalf of brands, working with influencers in the digital ecosystem. We do creator consulting, which means we tie up with different content creators and we consult with them also in terms of how they should be doing their content, what they should be looking at, and what kind of content opportunities they should be exploring. And finally, we have the Rabbit Hole, which is our production house. It's our internal production house. It does all the shoots today that you see on Netflix's YouTube channel, for example, are done by the Rabbit Hole. We're an end-to-end production agency. We do everything from smaller animated films and edits to larger full-scale TVC productions as well. We also have a company called Mammoth Studios. Mammoth is a transformative new age digital publishing company wherein we're building multiple publishing networks which are digital first and are providing content for the new age audience. We have Noesis Tech. Noesis Tech is a company that we acquired 2 years ago. It is an end-to-end tech solutions company, and we provide everything and anything under the tech ecosystem, such as websites, applications, inventory management systems, so on and so forth. And finally, we have Phosphene, which is our creative tech agency. Phosphene builds consumer tech for different brands. What I mean by consumer tech is technology which is very directly consumer interacting. So something like a chatbot, something like face filters, you see those dog ears and stuff on Instagram. So those kind of things, as well as augmented reality, virtual reality, and more evolved pieces of consumer tech as well. So yes, though, all in all, under the Zoom Media Network, we have 7 of these agencies who, in their own way, help businesses and brands in working through their options, in working through what they should be doing in the digital ecosystem, and also looking at what is best suited from a campaign point of view for any given brand at any given point in time. So some of the brands that we handle, and I know Vaishnavi's already mentioned a lot of them, so I won't spend too much time, but across the board, we work with some of the largest brands. We handle over 70 brands across all our 3 markets. We handle 10 brands under the Dabur ecosystem. We handle all the brands under the Hershey's ecosystem, under the Kellogg's ecosystem. We look at a few brands which are just into popular brands like Burger King, Huawei mobile phones. We have a lot of beauty brands like Faces and Rev. We worked with L'Oreal for the longest time. So yeah, I think over the course of my 7 years at Foxy as well, and across our 12 years of existence, I think we've worked with pretty much all the major brands in the country today, and continue to work with some of them, and we handle their entire digital presence. So that should sort of give you an idea of the kind of work that we do at our agency. So coming to my session, which is how to read a room. I haven't done this before, but this is something that I actually teach members who are part of my team over the course of, as we sort of work through it, that I teach them how do you kind of judge a lot of different things that are happening in a room. I've tried to break it down into like somewhat of a science so that it's easier for everyone to grasp, because context is difficult, right? When you're in a meeting, I can tell you this is what this one was thinking and that is what that one wanted to do. But in a Zoom webinar, it's kind of difficult to kind of take it from there. So we'll work through some examples, and hopefully that should help you guys understand what I'm talking about. So great. Now, when you look at nonverbal communication, right, this is the standard definition of nonverbal communication. It is the method of communicating with others using actions other than words, right? Hand gestures, eye contact, body language, appearance, touch, and tone of voice. These are the most common factors that you see, that everyone, you'll read this online, you'll sort of these are the things that you get taught in like your soft skills interviews, and these are the kind of things that people tell you to work on when it comes to personality development and such. um, 70 to 93% of all communication that happens is non-verbal. So I still don't think people pay enough attention to non-verbal communication, uh, because one, people don't necessarily understand it to the same degree that you would understand verbal communication. But it's also that people just don't think it has so much of an influence. And throughout my career, throughout my experience, I've actually seen that my ability to be able to communicate with someone, or to be able to judge how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and how they're reacting, has led to me being successful in a lot of different conversations across my career and across my like my personal experiences as well. And this is a scientific fact. So that only goes to show that it's not something that you should take lightly. It's something, given your stage of life that all of you students are in, it is definitely something that you should start harnessing from a very early age. Once you start practicing these things, is what makes it better, and then it eventually becomes something that flows very naturally to you. um, so I personally have always been on stage. So what I mean by that is, right from school days, I've been doing elocution and dramatics and debates and competitions and stuff like that, right? So um, the verbal communication comes very easily to me, because I can talk to you for 1 hour on just this slide and not change the slide and still be able to talk. That is the verbal component of it. But the non-verbal component of it is, who's interested in what now. If we were all in a class, if we were in a physical environment, I could be able to do a lot more of these things in person. But considering, in fact, now, because of COVID, because of the situation that we're in, non-verbal communication actually becomes even more important, because you can't read anything about the person that you would in human like in personal equation. But you have to try and figure out, what do they sound like, what are they thinking about, how are they reacting to different things, are they fidgety, are they not fidgety when their camera is on, are they looking at other things, are they looking at their phone, are they getting on calls, are they doing all of those things. Those are the sort of cues that you need to start picking up in today's environment when it comes to nonverbal communication. And it's a challenge. Hopefully by the time you guys graduate and stuff, we won't have to deal with this anymore, and we'll be back to meeting each other in person. But these kind of things really help as you move along in your career. Now, what are the universal? This is the universally understood, you know, paradigm of facial expressions: happy, sad, angry, upset, right? Fear, whichever one. And broadly speaking, human emotions fall under these four buckets, just like you have red, green, yellow, blue. Similarly, you have these four. And then there are, of course, multiple iterations of those four. And if I had to just classify in those under these four buckets, something as simple as this, right? This is very easy. Nobody else can interpret this as anything but happy. Correct? It's a very, very direct. And of course, I'm using a dog because dogs are generally always happy. But you also do understand that, right? Like, you automatically have a positive image in your head, unless you're afraid of dogs. If you like dogs as a person, the minute you see a dog picture, you're already smiling internally. It's a very happy feeling. It's that you get from dogs, and dogs, therefore, you interpret that image also as a happy image. This is what I mean by non-verbal communications. Dogs don't actually speak to us, but their persona and their demeanor is something which immediately constructs a positive image in our mind. So when you go out there into the corporate world and when you start dealing with clients, when you start dealing with peers, when you start dealing with colleagues, you need to be that person who they look forward to seeing. That is, I think, rule number one that you must abide by. No matter what, no matter how difficult a day, no matter what you're doing or how you're working or what you're presenting into, no matter what spectrum, you should always try and be that person in a room who brings in the positive energy, because you'll always be received in a positive way. I've had many clients over the years, sort of tell me and confide in me after I've been their agency for a while that, whenever we have a meeting with you, we always look forward to it because it's a break from a shitty day. Just because the amount of enthusiasm and the amount of positivity that you bring into our day is something that we look forward to, because again, it's something that people take for granted, but not most of the people that you work with aren't happy people. So if you kind of take custody of being that happiness person, like bringing that happiness into a room, you're going to affect the energy in the room dramatically. And that for me is one of the, like, it's the step one of non-verbal communication, is to be happy and to be positive about whatever it is that you're there to discuss. And that is something that you can't take for granted. It's something that is, I kid you not, as you grow in your career, it's one of the most difficult things to keep maintaining that level of positivity and happiness, because there's business problems, there's marketing problems, there's a lot of other things that are going on. But if you retain this as a part of, it's like a switch. If you train your brain to make it into a switch, okay, I'm going into a room, this is what I'm going to achieve, and I'm going to be happy about it. It takes a while, but then it becomes second nature to you. And that's one of the best, I think, pieces of advice that I could ever give anyone, is that continue to be the happy person in the room. That always helps. Now, yes, if we look at happy, sad, fear, and anger, but there are so many other expressions out there, right? There are so many other interpretations of anything that facial expressions can mean. So the trick is not to make it only about the facial expressions. That's what I have learned, is that it's not only about what they're looking at or what they're depicting on their face. There are actually a lot more things that go into it, which compose of non-verbal communication. Facial expressions, and typically the way that we understand non-verbal communications is only facial expressions, but there are a lot more things that go into it, and I'll just break down 5 types of non-verbal communication for you. And then from there, I would say you should start being mindful of these things as you go about your daily life, so that you're able to pick up on what others are also doing. So first is called kinesics. Kinesics is the typical interpretation: posture, eye language, facial expressions, so on and so forth. So any kind of body movements and gestures. So I always gesticulate a lot with my hands, right? I mean, I'm sure you all are being able to see it on a video camera, but you can only imagine how much that is in person. When I have a boardroom and I have a bunch of people and I have a whiteboard and marker, right? So that is a way in which I gesticulate, I communicate as well. It shows passion, it shows interest, it shows attention, it shows focus. It shows a lot of different things when put together, which is all of these things body language related are called kinesics. Typically, this is where our interpretation of nonverbal ends. Everybody just says sit straight, don't cross your arms, keep it light, make eye contact with everybody that you're talking to, don't get distracted, don't look at your phone. All of these things fall under kinesics, but there's 4 others, believe it or not, that go into it. So second is haptics. Now haptics in the corona world, unfortunately, are are no longer there, because you're not shaking hands. But shaking hands is a big part of any kind of formal environment as you move along in your careers, wherein how you touch, how do you shake hands. Is it a pat on the shoulder? If it's somebody a senior that you're meeting, are you shaking hands, not shaking hands? What is the decorum? That study and that part of it is called haptics. And I would encourage everybody, because over the course of doing the business that I do, I must have worked with across 100 different brands in my life so far. and I must have interviewed at least 300 candidates in 300 400 candidates in the past 7 years. A handshake tells you so much. I know it's conventionally sab bolte hain ye, but please practice your handshakes, right? It is important, especially when you go out there for interviews and such, that it is something that we take for granted ki acha haath to milana aata hi hai, but that's not true. Practice your handshakes to be confident and firm, not not weird and like awkward. uh, you know exactly when you're entering a room that you are going to shake hands. So there needs to have there needs to be a certain level of energy that you are communicating through your handshake. So handshakes are very important. um, don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. They are important, so do practice those. um, the third thing is vocalics. Now, vocalics is how do you tone down or tone up, or how do you communicate your messages? You may be communicating things which are already written on a slide, but the way that you are explaining certain things, the way that you can change your pitch and your volume and your tone. So you can say the same thing in different ways, and they can be interpreted differently. So if I say something like, let's say, while we had presented this to you last year, it makes a lot more sense this year. Simple line. Now, if I say it in a way, I'll say it in a couple of different ways for you to understand what I'm talking about, where I say, while we had presented this to you last year, but this year it makes a lot more sense. Right? That's convincing. That's a lot more where you are communicating your energy towards it. Another way to do it would be, we had presented this to you last year, but sure, it makes a lot more sense this year. This is me trying to tell you that मैं काम कर लिया था पिछले साल. You rejected it. Now you want to pick it up, so it's fine. So it's on you. Right? I agree. We'll do it. Versus if you say something as simple as in a different way that, while we presented this to you last year, this is what it is this year. It's a very non-interested way of doing things. It's not communicating anything. It is just somebody who's saying a bunch of words put together. Now, again, there are pitch, right? So your pitch can go from a low pitch to a high pitch where you're trying to explain and you're excited and you're, anticipatory of a lot of things. Or if you're talking about something serious, like if you're discussing numbers, if you're asking questions, if you're sort of going to be like, how does this affect the value chain that you're creating in the life of the consumer? If you alter your pitch, therefore, depending on what you're communicating and what you're trying to say. And pitch is different from volume. Volume can also be attention grabbing as and when you need it to be. And tone is, of course, as I explained in the previous example, that tone is different things where you take different pauses and breaks at different points in the same sentence to mean completely separate individual things. So vocalics is also something that you should practice. I always give this advice to people who are starting out. Record yourself. Just take a voice note of you saying the same thing in different ways. And especially, again, since you all will be getting into interviews and such, if I believe at some point in time in the next couple of years or months, definitely do practice how you're introducing yourself to a potential interviewer. Because whether it's on the phone or it's on a video call or it's in person, you have to be able to communicate draw attention to the points that you want the person to draw attention to. Vocalics is something that you always have good presenters, bad presenters. That is one thing, right? That's natural ability, but you can also work on it. But communicating on the regular, when you look at vocalics, is extremely important, because you need to be able to understand how you sound, and that only comes from practicing. So you have to keep practicing this. I've grown up practicing my speeches and my things in front of a mirror. You could do it on voice notes. The simplest way, you could take the help of a friend and be like, I'm going to pitch myself to you, and you tell me how I sound, right? And do this with your parents, do it with anyone who listen. But if you start getting this right from an early on age, it becomes second nature to you as you sort of get into the real world. And it is one of the simplest but most powerful things that you can have in your toolkit of what you're doing. Fourth is proxemics. Now, proxemics is the study of space and distance. And what this means is a lot of times when you walk into boardrooms and a part of reading the room is that, if you're sitting on a table, this is something like I teach my juniors and my teams as they come in, that something as simple as the agency, as in our team, everybody sit on the same side of the table, right? It's a very unsaid thing, but it gives that feeling of unity. It gives that feeling of unition, that you are all saying the same thing, you're all on the same page, and you're coming from the same powerful space. Even including who sits where, right? So depending on what the meeting is for, depending on what the person who's leading the meeting, where they are sitting, you either make direct. So if I'm the leader, which in my case most of the time I am, if I'm leading the conversation, then I will sit completely opposite or in proximity to the person who's leading. So if that person is sitting at the head of the table, I'll always take a chair next to him or her. If that person is sitting in the center of the table, then I will again take a chair opposite him or her. But that proximity does a lot because it exudes power. It gives you, there's a power dynamic in a room, which is determined by how much space there is between you guys. This again, I think another example is if when you actually learn how to read a room, right? This is one of the key factors that determines how you read a room. I'll give you an example. If you have a long table conversation that's going on, and you have a long table, the boss, the super boss, the director of the company sits at the head of the table. Now, you need to observe how far are his employees sitting from him. So if he's sitting at the head of the table and there's like a 2-chair gap, and then his employees are sitting on the throughout the length of the table, that means as a leader, he's sort of like a distant leader. He is very powerful. There isn't a lot of comfort. It's a very formal relationship between him and his employees. It's a very offhanded, where he's not involved in their daily tasks and their daily operations. Now, what does that tell me? How am I reading that room? Is that I know one thing, whatever I have spoken to his team so far, he has no clue about, because he's not involved in their daily operations. I know that he doesn't directly know what is the agency or what am I working with them on. So, which means that I have to give him that kind of context. I have to explain everything to him in a short span of time, with being able to explain weeks and weeks of work that I have done with his team to him. Second thing, what it tells me is that he wants a separate, demarkedly separate time and attention given to him. That means that in my meeting, whatever it is that I'm explaining, most of it I need to explain to him. I need to address those things to him, and I need to convince him. And this is different with different leaders. There are leaders where there is a certain level of comfort that you can visibly see between the boss and between his team. When that happens, the boss is more relaxed. So, which means that if the team is convinced, this is just a meeting for the boss to say okay and sign off on it. He's not really going to decide because his team has already decided. Versus if there is this formal structure and this formal setup, that means we have to convince him with his team. We're on the same page as the team and we have to convince them कि ये करना है. So these kind of things, the more you live through it, the more you observe, the more you'll understand, and the more you'll be able to therefore change what you are doing and saying according to the people in the room. This is one of the things when you say you read a room. Another thing is, does smaller things like, does the boss come in late after everybody? Does he walk in with everybody at the same time? Again, tells you about the kind of team that they're in. It tells you the kind of, reporting structure that they have, the kind of working environment that they have. That again gives you a lot of leverage if you're sitting on the other side of the table. It gives you a lot of leverage because you can make calculated assessments about who's doing what, how bad, good is this meeting going to go, what do I need to explain in a better way so that this man can understand. Similarly, the last one, which is your chronomatics, which is to do with time. Now, time is very, very critical. It is something that I am very respectful of usually. And as much as possible, never late for as many things as I can. Of course, if it's out of your control, sure. But you are always judged on your promptness and your efficiency. There are leaders who take it for granted because they're like, oh, I have 500 other meetings, so it's okay if I walk into a meeting half an hour late. I personally don't, I condone that. I'm not an advocate of that practice or any such practice which abuses time ever. Um, but if you speak about it in the context of reading a room, uh, when you see a lot of things, for example, if I, in the middle of now this, I'm explaining something to you and I'm looking at you, if I suddenly sort of either start looking at my phone or I'm like, give me a second, and I put myself on mute and I have to do a call, or even otherwise, these are the things that, they give you an indication of how much attention the person is paying, or how important or how well are they dividing their time. So for me, the best sign and the best piece of advice I can tell you in this department is that whenever you get into a meeting room, correct, and I do this very evidently in my meeting rooms, uh, you get into the room, and a lot of people have this dirty habit of, like, keeping your phone face up. So as the meeting is happening, you're kind of looking at stuff. If somebody else is talking, you're disinterested, you're looking at stuff, you're just glancing, oh, maybe something very important has come up in my day and I need to pay attention to it. But to be professional, even if your best thing would be to keep your phone away. But if you cannot keep your phone away for whatever reasons, if you're expecting an urgent call or something like that, then keep your phone face down. When you keep your phone face down in a meeting room, you're taken that much more seriously by the people who are across the table, because that is a non-verbal cue to them that I am taking this meeting very seriously and I'm not going to get distracted. Are you? So that making a gesture, physical gesture, to actually take your phone and invert it and put it up and then sort of start talking is a very key point when it comes to being able to communicate in that way the seriousness and the intent of what the meeting is trying to denote and do. So coming to the question that how do these 5 different things, uh, what do they have, how does this help you read a room, right? And very simply, I would say you have to keep thinking about it. You have to start observing these things. I think a very big part, the most important, 80% of the job of reading a room is observing. So that again stems to something which is very non-verbal, but it's important for students, is that you have to go into each and every meeting prepared. If you are composed before you enter that meeting room, or any interview room, whichever kind of room that you're entering, if you are composed and you know your stuff, only then is when you can open up your mindfulness to observe what other people are doing. If you're struggling ke, oh, I'm nervous, ppt तैयार नहीं है, खत्म नहीं हुआ meeting, I have so many other things to do, I have to finish this paper, I have to buy groceries for home, I have to do, mom had called, I have to do whatever else I have to do. When you enter a room, leave that outside the room. Because if you carry it with you in your room, the same way that I read people, I'm going to be reading you. And there's going to be somebody else who is going to be in that space and who's going to be reading you and your energy. So they're going to be able to read that you're distracted. They're going to ask you tougher questions if they see that you're distracted. They're going to read if you're nervous. They're going to grill you a lot more if you're nervous. They're going to, everybody reacts and feeds off of these energies. Because as I said at the beginning, almost 93%, 70 to 93% is happening through non-verbal. So a lot of people do it obviously, a lot of people do it subconsciously, but as human beings, we do this. So this is very important. And simple examples, even when you're if you're talking to your girlfriend or boyfriend on the phone, for example, you can tell from the way that they sound ke mood acha hai, mood nahi acha hai, so on and so forth, right? It's the same thing even in meetings. It's the same thing even in the corporate world. It's the same thing when your dad comes home and he's in a bad mood. You know कि पंगे नहीं लेने. You know that you don't have to get into trouble or do something that you've done wrong. You will then be like, oh, okay, no, I'll be good. I won't ask for permission to go here or there, or I won't trouble him because he's had a bad day, so he's not going to probably lean into this. Most of the kids, I'm sure, majority of our practice in this comes from our parents, because you try and read your parents before you ask for something. You try and see aaj mood kaisa hai, right? It's the standard thing. So as you sort of grow in life also, it's usually parents, then it becomes your best friends, it becomes your relationships, eventually it becomes at some point even your colleagues and stuff are added to it. So my advice would be, we all do it. We don't probably think about it, but I think when you start thinking about it, a lot of it makes sense. So remember the five ones, which is, and which go into the non-verbal communication, and start observing these things as you move along, and then sort of define your own style of doing it, define your own way of pitching your voice, toning your voice, define your own way of how to command a room. What is it that you want to do to sort of get into the room space? Not to discount things like body language and personality. Those are very important. How you present yourself, what do you wear, what do you look like, are you clean and tidy? All of those things which are in the first one are important, but those are not the only things. You can look like a superstar when you walk into a room, but if what you're saying is not matching the way that you look, it won't add up. So the preparedness that goes into a meeting not is the first is definitely the most important step before you enter that room for you to be sorted in the head. So yes, now I just wanted to keep it simple, as I'd said. So I'll walk you all through three examples and three situations, and what I would sort of do in those situations, and what I would read in that room, and then post which I think we can open up for questions and answers. So the first example let's take is a meeting. Now, when it comes to a meeting, which is a formal meeting, first thing I usually establish when I enter is who's the boss. And who's the boss, not necessarily by designation, but who's the boss, who's going to take that decision, who's commanding the shots, who's calling the shots. Um, that can also change depending on what I'm here for. Let me give you an example. Um, if I am pitching Foxymoron as an agency to a board of directors, um, when I am pitching all the things that we do, I am pitching to the chief marketing officer, the CMO. But when it comes to what is the kind of sales impact that we've been able to build, I am pitching to the CFO. So my person who's the boss in both situations changes. This can happen in the middle of a meeting. This can also happen in different meetings. This can happen a lot of times. We get into negotiations. So when it comes to negotiations, also things are different. Different companies may alag log negotiate with you. So no matter which situation of a meeting that you're walking into, who's the boss is important to establish, because then your interaction with them needs to change. Excuse me. You need to pay a lot more attention to them. You need to be able to look at what are the things that they are interested in knowing more about, and then play up your conversation accordingly. Second, level of interest. A lot of times my juniors get very disheartened and they come to me because they are like, when you present, everyone's paying attention, but when we're presenting, people get distracted. How do we change that? Correct? My tip for that is always that it is not possible that if you're presenting to 5 people in a room, all 5 of them don't have interest. I understand that 3 of them may not be interested. Leave them aside, pitch to the 2 people who are interested. Because the level of interest can always get a conversation going. What typically happens in this situation, let me explain. If 5 people in a room, 3 are not paying attention, 2 of the people who are paying attention are listening to you. You can see that they're listening to you, and you start conversing with them. If they start talking back to you, if they start asking you a question again, if they start saying, can you explain this better? Or they say, oh, but I had seen this example of Nike, so how do you explain? Immediately, the other 3 people who are not paying attention, their ears go up. That somebody else is talking in the room besides Prachi, who's just going on talking, right? So therefore, level of interest, find the person who is interested in what you're saying in the room and talk to that person. If the other people are ignoring you, you ignore them. It's fine. If they start paying attention to you, then you pay attention to them as well. But always find a focal person who has a certain level of interest. The third thing that you need to bring to a table is excitement and earnestness. I already explained that you should be the happiest person. there should also be a level of excitement. A lot of times we're so overworked and we're so stressed and tired that we stop being excited about what we're going to talk about and why it's important. Um, I could also come into this lecture and sort of be like, it's Saturday, man. It's 11 o'clock. It's my holiday. I haven't slept for 4 days. Uh, you know, what is happening? And uh, I don't, why am I doing this? Why does my copcom make me do this? And I can still do my obligation, do the lecture and move away. Nobody's going to say anything to me. But if I don't have that level of excitement, then what's the fun? Because you have asked me, invited me here for a reason, and I want to be here for a reason. I may have agreed at a point where I didn't know what my week is going to be like. But it's unfair if you are not excited about what you're going to talk about to expect a level of interest from anybody else in the room. So I think excitement, even if that means just like hitting yourself 2 3 times before, if it just means you have dark circles, so you wear fake spectacles so that you look a little more presentable and put together in a room. You can do these things. These are things that you play with all the time. But it's important because you have to get into that mindset, even if it's for 1 hour, after which I may want to just go back to sleep. That's fine. But for that 1 hour that I'm in this meeting, for that 1 hour that I'm in front of my client, for that 1 hour that I'm in front of a team, I'm going to be excited about what I'm talking about. Because if I am not excited, I cannot expect you to be interested. And earnestness. Earnestness is your sheer ability and the preparedness that goes into what you're going to talk about, right? Even if I may not have prepared for this lecture, I knew what I wanted to talk about. So in my head, my preparation started early in the week to say, okay, this is something interesting. This is something interesting. I know somebody reached out to me. I'm sorry, but they were trying to get me to commit to a topic of what I want to talk about today, and I did not. They messaged me on like Wednesday, and I'm just like, this is Saturday. This is like a whole three days before what I'm supposed to say. I don't even know what I'm going to be doing tonight in terms of, am I going to go home or am I going to stay in office working? So, like you're asking me for a topic 3 days away, and I apologize. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know yet, but I will come up with something. Um, so you have to start putting in the hard work, no matter how big or small the task. It is not necessary, and your clients and your professional circle, whichever company you land up working in, they are not going to, you may be the most intelligent person in the room, but if you don't have a certain level of earnestness, you lose out big points, right? And that earnestness, again, why is it non-verbal, is because that sincerity comes across in a meeting, no matter what. If you are confident, and you maybe, and trust me, I mean, as you grow up and as you grow older, and you'll be able to tell this, there are a lot of people in a lot of meeting rooms who are the show offs. They will come fully decked up, fully prepared, and their confidence levels are through the roof. They can speak endlessly about one slide, just the way I said that I can. But if they're immediately discounted because they don't know what they're talking about. A lot of times you'll come across these people. Suit boot pen ke aayenge, tie, baal, sahi, everything is on point, right? But everybody in the room knows that what he's going to speak is of no substance because he hasn't done his homework. He's just here, he's as a showpiece. He's here to make the agency look good. He's here to make the company look good. And he's here if there is a relationship that needs to be built. अगर setting करानी है, ये setting करने वाला बंदा है. But is he the person who's going to actually sincerely work towards what I want? No. And you never want to be that person, because that person is charming and all of that. It has a certain, he's like a superstar, but the person you want to be in the movie is the director. That is what your aim is in any kind of professional meeting environment, for you to be taken seriously. And the last one in a meeting is who wants what. Correct? Now, this is important for you to understand because it comes with a certain level of empathy. It comes with a certain level of emotional intelligence. But this is very important, and I always say this to people: think of it this way, the KPIs, the key performing index, your performance, and you are getting evaluated basis a certain thing. But eventually, the people who are addressing you or who are talking to you, they will get something out of what you're presenting. They are here to get, whether it's your boss, whether it's the co-founder of your agency, whether it is your client, they want something from you. That is why that meeting is happening in the first place. So it is your job to also, whether it is with time and experience, whether it's within the confines of that room and that conversation, for you to evaluate which person in the room wants exactly what from me, so that you can play up those aspects, right? An example I'll give you is that if I'm talking to the CMO of the company versus I'm talking to the digital marketing head of the company. If I am talking to the digital marketing head, I'm going to get into a lot more details of what is happening in the campaign, what are the steps, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, because his job depends on that. Because tomorrow he's going to have to explain this presentation to his boss. So therefore, my job, that's what he wants from me. He wants a complete understanding of how things are going. Versus if I'm talking to the CMO, who's also in the room, he or she only wants to know what are the top lines? How is this going to affect my business? What is competition doing? Right? So what are my competitors in the market doing along the same lines? What is it that this campaign is going to do for me? Why do I think I need to spend 50 lakh rupees on doing this campaign? What are the results that I'm going to get back? Now, this is what I mean by earnestness, because you never know who's going to show up in a meeting. There can be, you have to be prepared with all situations. Okay, this can happen, or that can happen, or that can happen. Do I have the answers to all these questions? And most of the time, when I see people fumble in a meeting, get nervous in a meeting, your nervousness in a meeting comes from a lack of preparedness and a lack of knowledge. So if you know, then you know, and then that person, then you're prepared for that situation as well. So always understand who wants what, and that is a key component of trying to figure out how things need to progress. Second situation I've taken is a date, right? Because of course, I'm sure everybody is going on dates, wants to go on dates, should go on dates, all of that. The reason over here is not to give you tips on dating, but the reason over here is I'm trying to explain to you, this is also a room. This is also non-verbal communication. And if you truly want to master these things and you want to become good at them, you have to practice them in different types of day, in different times of rooms as well. First thing, nervousness. How nervous is the person who's sitting opposite you? The nervousness also tells you, is there a comfort level that's established? Is it not? If they're comfortable with you, why are they nervous? That means is something about you making them nervous, is something about the environment making them nervous, is something that has happened in their day making them nervous. You should therefore be able to read nervous energy off of them, because then you can adapt your conversation and understand better, ask the right questions. Seat at the table. This is very interesting, but where a person sits on the table is often very reflective of either their power, or how they want to be perceived and portrayed, or how interested they are in the conversation. So if a guy comes and sits across the table and where he can see a television screen, that is automatically negative 20 points. Because then, even if he wants to, no matter how interested he is in talking to me, he's going to spend at least 30% of the time looking at the score. Can't help it. It just happens. You're just going to keep doing that. So if you're the guy, I would say you pick a seat which is in the opposite direction of the TV screen if you're genuinely interested. Similarly, if you're a girl, right, don't pick a seat which looks at the door, because if you're sitting opposite, you're always going to constantly be looking at who's wearing what, who's doing what, who's walking in. Do I know somebody else over here, right? So even when you're picking a seat at the table and picking a table, these are non-verbal things. You may not do it consciously, but you still do it as human beings. And so therefore it's important. It's the same thing if you're sitting in a lecture. Where you are sitting also depends on how sleepy you are. Where you're sitting also depends on how interesting the subject is. Do you like that particular subject or not, right? Do you like that professor or not? Are you sitting close to your family, like, group? Are you sitting close to your study group? Are you sitting close to people who pay attention in class versus backbenchers? These are all things which are seated at the table. Same thing gets applied across all walks of life. I have just used it as an example in a date. Body positivity. This, I think, is critical no matter which walk of life again. But you have to be happy and positive about the way that you appear. Now, if you as a person don't care about how you appear, you still should maintain a basic level of appearances. Um, Body positivity in all personal and professional relationships and environments is extremely critical, because if you have that level of confidence, you'll have a confident body language. You'll therefore have a confident conversation. Be happy with who you are and how you look. If you're not happy, work on yourself till the point that you get happy, because that happiness shows, reflects, and is very important. So if you don't like the amount of shirts that you have, figure out how you're going to get more shirts, or get a shirt that you like or that you feel you look amazing in. Others' opinions don't matter. It doesn't matter whether other people think my earrings are good or not. I look amazing because I love these earrings. So build that body positivity in yourself. You are the only one who judges it. And that reads off as majorly non-verbal communication in any kind of meeting. And finally, focus. You have to be paying attention to what the other person is saying, right? A lot of us do that mistake. You look at your phone, you'll get a call, you'll get an Amazon delivery, you'll get a call from home, you'll get a ping on Instagram. Oh, did you upload an image or what? Like, that's a constant question that you're asking across the table. Somebody WhatsApped something. Take away all of that and focus if you're truly interested in what it is that you're the person that you're on a date with, for sure. The last situation I've taken is an interview, because I believe, again, that's going to be important to you all, right? For me, again, in an interview, body positivity, very important, critical in its own case, because that's one of the first things I read when somebody walks into a room. Are they comfortable drinking a glass of water, right? Everybody gets a glass of water. How are they drinking that glass of water? Are they fidgety? Are they comfortable and relaxed? Do they confidently keep their bag down, or are they looking ke bag kahan rakhu? Where do I put what? It's not ke bag, you don't have to slam your bag down, but it's very obvious, no? You look at a room, before you settle down, before you sit down, you almost imagine yourself sitting down, and where do you need to place yourself? How do you need to place yourself? So sit down, put your bag down, keep it next, and whatever. You want to have a sip of water. If you don't have a glass of water, again, a lot of candidates in interviews make this mistake. If having a glass of water, you're going to be talking a lot in an interview. That is what the interview is for. Please, if you're not presented with a glass of water, please ask for a glass of water. Because I would much rather have you settle down and have that way to, take a breath. Sometimes you don't know the answers to questions and you need to think. It's okay to have a glass of water and be like, okay, this is okay. That's an interesting question. So I think, in my experience, the best way to go about it is etc., right? So it's okay to have that sip of water. Anyone and everyone who's interviewing you knows you're nervous. What we are wanting to see is, how do you handle your nervousness? We are not expecting you to be some superstar at day one. But are you able to control yourself and curtail yourself, is what we're looking at. Can you conduct yourself in a way that gives out that level of composure, is what we're looking for. Second is level of interest. It is very important to showcase your level of interest. And sometimes people only just research about my company and come to me, right? They'll say, oh, either they would have checked out my LinkedIn profile, or they would have gone to the Foxy Moron website and said, oh, you all do great work, right? Only that is not important. What is important is, how is that interesting to you? I know what work Foxy Moron has done. I know what work I have done. When I say level of interest, I want to know what about my work interests you. Which of my campaigns have you liked? What is your point of view? So I really appreciate candidates who come in and say that, I had seen a Maybelline campaign that y'all had done, and I liked it because. Don't just say, I liked your Maybelline campaign. Of course, I know you liked it. We have won multiple awards for it. You telling me you liked a Maybelline campaign, you think that that's going to give you brownie points because I now know that you went to my website. No, that's a minimum basic expectation. that you must go to the company website and check it out. But what is it that you appreciated about it, or you took away from it, or you think could have been done better? That shows your level of interest. And so therefore have that level of interest in either the person who's interviewing you, or the company that you're interviewing for, or the role that you're interviewing for, whichever way, right? Knowledge. A lot of people know a lot of things, but they don't communicate it. So therefore knowledge I have put as non-verbal. And because of course it's a hard skill also, it is what you know, it is the result of all the things that you know. But the knowledge where I mean over here is, if you don't know an answer to a question, or if you don't know what a certain thing means, your knowledge is being tested, wherein you can take that same situation and adapt it into the things that you already know, right? An example of that, let's say, hypothetically, now, I mean, of course, I've been doing a business role for 4 years now. But if I was just doing a marketing role, like if I was just doing a plain and simple agency role, and I did not know what business side of things mean, and how the company makes money, and so on and so forth. And my interviewer asks me, so what has been your experience on revenue models and business generation and those sort of things? And I turn around and say that, to be fair, not a lot. I haven't explored that side of the business or that side of the agency. But what I do know is that the basic need is that we need to make money. So if money is the criteria, I'm sure across different verticals, we make different types of money. So my endeavor would continue to be that do more of whatever makes us more money, and try to curtail whatever we're losing money on. That is what my understanding of it is. Then I would probably move on to explain the campaign. For example, a campaign I did last year, I had 50 lakh rupees from the client. The way that I divided it was this. Is the campaign that I did last year a direct answer to the question that the person asked me? No. But I am trying to explain to that person that I know that you have to keep doing what makes you more money and what makes you less money. Now let me show you that I have handled money before. I had a campaign which was worth 50 lakh rupees, and I could divide it into different things. That is all I'm saying. Now, what that does to the interviewer is that it is explaining to me that you at least correlated the right thing with the right objective. That the campaign that you have to run is what you translated into what I'm looking at ways of making money, which is correct. Of course, there are multiple layers in between, but at least the correlation, the school of thought is that it's falling under the right chain. So therefore, when I say knowledge, it means knowledge about what you're interviewing for, where are you interviewing at, where are you sort of looking at information, how are you studying, what is the market, what is the industry, so on and so forth. So that knowledge is very important. And finally, confidence. Confidence doesn't mean being overconfident. Confident doesn't mean just arguing back for the sake of it. Underconfidence doesn't make me feel, it makes me feel sorry for you, sure, but it doesn't make me think of you as like in a better light. Because a lot of people think that, if they behave a little meek and all, it means that it's going to have a positive impact on the interviewer. It's not. I want you to be your authentic self. I want you to be who you are and exude that level of confidence about yourself. And so when you have these things, your level of interest, knowledge, body positivity combined with confidence, people are going to hire you for who you are more than what you know. This is a fact. I always say this to other seniors in the team when they start interviewing candidates and they're like, Prachi, what should we be looking for? I always tell them, skill we can teach. Look for intent. They should have the intent to work. How they need to do it, etc., we'll always teach them. Because every job will teach you how you need to work regardless. You don't get into a job knowing everything. You can never do it. So the intent needs to be there. And therefore, the confidence of why I am the perfect fit for your company or for this role or for this department or for this industry is what needs to be backed. You need to back yourself on that. So yeah, I think that for me concludes it. I think what everybody needs to remember, no matter what stage of your career you're going to be in, the challenges are very real, especially now, given the pandemic, given everything is happening like this in a in a non in-person situation. So it is challenging, and you have to accept that it's going to be challenging. But at the same time, I think the struggle is going to be constant, pandemic or not. Even if you move out of the pandemic, it's not like the real world is better. That is also struggling. There's a lot of struggles. You have to kind of keep juggling between a lot of things. But what these non-verbal cues sort of help you do is that you have to sort of say, oh, I read that right, I understood that right, I got that right, and when you start doing this before you get to the stages of the professional world, when you do this in person with your friends and with your family members and things like that, you have to acknowledge what you get right, and therefore kind of keep building on your expertise and your knowledge, and always be your own cheerleader. No matter what, always be that happy person who's happy and confident about who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. Very important to do that. And finally, no matter what, always work towards earning their respect. You have to earn the person's respect. And respect can be, okay, I know I'm not going to get the job, but thank you for taking this time out and explaining these things to me. It is also okay to ask questions. So you can ask, we always love it when somebody comes and says, okay, what did you think of the interview? What do you think I can do better? Why do you think I'm not fit for this role? Right? It's great when you ask for feedback, because we would give that feedback, because that's what's going to make you better and better and better. And that is, I think, one of the best things that you can do is to earn their respect. That no matter what, even if you didn't land the job and you're not fit for the role, but I respected this professional interaction. So yeah, I think those are the things I would want to say. But thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Prachi Bali, for that wonderful presentation on how to read a room, or may I say, how to read people. I'm sure students here today have not only enjoyed this presentation, but have also understood the various skills required for understanding the dynamics of any situation, be it in a business meeting or a family time. Reading a room is a social skill which has got a universal applicability. On a very personal level, I would like to thank you for speaking on two topics today. Firstly was happiness. Secondly was about body positivity. We all know the kind of pressure the students are under these days. These two topics, if they've understood it fully, I'm sure would take them a long way. Looks like we already have a few questions which I would be asking on their behalf.
Sure.
The very first one, ma'am, is from Anshul. Now, Anshul wants to ask, can we ever fully master the art of understanding any situation, or be an expert at reading a room?
Um, because it's a non-tangible skill, I think the answer is there itself, that no, you can't. There's no, you're not. It's not a 10 on 10. You can't get a 10 on 10. But you only keep getting better until the point that you start trusting your instinct. So once you start developing an instinct and trusting your instinct, then you know. Like I'll give you a recent example. Me and my co-founder both walked into a room after a pitch meeting, and the MD of the company was sitting in her, like she was sitting in the center, and two of her guys were sitting. One was sitting on a chair opposite her table, and one was standing next to her. When we entered the room, I looked at my co-founder Pratik and I was like, she's going to close. What I mean by that is, given the dynamic of how they were standing and how she was sitting, I knew she wanted to negotiate. If she didn't want to negotiate, she would have come back into that room and just said, guys, why don't you all email us your proposal? And baat wahan hi khatam ho jati. The fact that she was sitting in her chair, in her boss's chair, and inviting us to sit opposite, that means she's on the table. She wants to negotiate, right? The fact that the two guys are standing, like one is sitting and one is standing away from it, is because they have already given in to whatever she is saying, which means who's in power? Only she. They have no point of view. So I know that for the next 15 minutes, I need to forget whatever I've said to them and only focus on what she's saying and what I have said to her. And then the fact that her level of confidence in that room, कि यही करना है, I knew that she's going to throw in an unexpected turn. So wherein she threw in, just to give an example, like to explain, we were pitching for business A at a price B. She couldn't pay us price B for business A. So she said, I will give you price B, but I will give you also this little more business so that you can justify it. That's what it turned out to be eventually. But just that, these rooms and the entry and just understanding, observing, I knew that this is mine. Now, how do I manipulate it? So you get prepared for those things. So when you start doing more of this, you start trusting your instinct. And that is for me a scale of mastery, because you have to listen to what you are thinking more than anything else. So yeah.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. Well, I've got the second question. It's from Raghav. Now, Raghav says, do we require higher levels of EQ, emotional quotient, to fully understand a situation?
Yes, I mean, EQ is what it's all about. I think EQ is something which is it's very well accepted also now as one of the basic skills of assessment when it comes to being a leader, when it comes to being promoted also in life. uh, People do value, and your bosses also observe your emotional quotient. And does it need to be at a high value level? Yes. Do you need to develop it? Yes. um, is it something that's difficult? No, I don't think it's that difficult. I think we make a lot out of it unnecessarily. It's quite simple to do. It's not. It's just about being a human. Yeah, emotions are everything that is about being is emotion driven. So even there are so many times my clients, for example, they become my friends because after a meeting, if they were off, I have been able to see that they're off, and I'll just drop them a text saying, "Hey, is everything okay outside of work? Are you all right? Do you want to chat? Do you want to go for a coffee? Is there anything I can help with?" They may never do give me any work or anything like that, but just that you have that rapport and understanding, because then you know next time he's going to stand up for you because you stood up for him and you just asked. So I think at the base level of it, please, no matter what, no matter how big you become in your careers and so on and so forth, always remember that we're all humans, and that is the core thing that connects you to everybody else in the room. So never forget that or disrespect it. um, so that's what I would say. That's the fundamental of building your EQ, and then it sort of just builds along. The more people you meet, the better you get.
In fact, the other questions I've got from Abhishek. Now, Abhishek's question is, would you recommend any book to him? It could be on any topic. He wants to ask a book that you would recommend.
A book that I would recommend.
Yes.
So I'm actually a bad person for this because I love reading only fiction. I think as a person, for me, I've always I've loved reading all my life, but I don't like personally reading these kind of books, because for me reading is an escape, and so I do it to not think about the real world. But yeah, I think there are a lot of good recommendations out there from people who actually do find them meaningful and useful. For me, it's always been about meeting a lot more people. So the more people I meet, the more I understand, the more I sort of learn. So I will learn and educate and understand, what are the kind of things that are interesting uh, to them, what are the kind of things that are helpful to them in their daily lives. Other than that, I think I would personally, if I had to, read autobiographies. So read the journey more than commandments, if that makes any sense. So read, there's a great book, I forget the name, but it is about the story between Adidas and Nike and Puma and how that entire thing happened. uh, Great techniques, because Adi Dassler, who was the inventor of and creator of Adidas, he was not a verbal guy. He was not a communicator. He was a genius. And you can almost see the kind of mistakes that he made, therefore, on the EQ front in order to land him there. You can read the Starbucks journey. So there's, again, I don't remember the name of the book, but there's a book which encapsulates how Starbucks came about. Starbucks, even if you look at it as a brand, is really nothing other than emotions. You're paying a premium on coffee just because you feel great about walking into that place and you feel great holding that cup. And it's almost a statement, right? So when you actually study how they made it about so much more than coffee, right? So my recommendation, therefore, would be to read these kind of journeys about the brand or about the inventor or the co-founder, rather than how to improve your something. So because real life versus theoretical, I'm always the real life person. So off the top of my head, the two books I would recommend would be the Starbucks journey and the Nike Adidas, like the Nike Puma fight and how that happened.
Right, ma'am.
Yeah.
Uh, as we come towards the end of this presentation,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to thank Ms. Prachi Bali for taking time out for this webinar. And last but not the least, the students of Himalayan Institute of Technology for joining in this webinar. In the end, I would like to invite our registrar, Professor Sudhir Badola, for a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Iqbal sir. Respected Director Ma'am, Mrs. Archana Jasola, Honorable Speaker, Ms. Prachi, Business Head North, Foxy Moron, my colleagues and dear students. Ma'am, really, it was a wonderful session today. You know, the things which you have told, you know, the main thing, you know, that nervousness, I think it is with everyone. And what you told really, that who is not nervous, right? And I think that would have, you know, the students must have understood how to, you know, remove that nervousness from them. What are the points they should look for? What are the points while they are communicating with others? You know, the body actions and the pitch you told, the hands movement and all. I think these are the things which, if we will, you know, look after, and that can give us a very perfect personality. I think what we say a personality, it is basically a mixture of all these things which you have told. And really, ma'am, it was a very good session, ma'am, and I thank you again for giving your precious time. I know you're very, very busy, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me. And it's great. I think these things are super amazing for students to understand at this age. I personally went to my college, HR college, and our principal at the time, Dr. Shahani. Uh, I've interacted with some of the best corporate leaders, and I think that these are such foundational years for the future of our country that I think the more sensitized we can get our students to be for all of these things like y'all are doing, I think it's great because we grow our leaders, right? You grow a leader. And I think schooling, education is a big part of that growth and that journey, because that's what differentiates everyone. So these kind of talks, I think, are amazing. I've always attended as many talks as I could, because you always gain a perspective. And one thing that I've always noticed is no matter what, no matter who, how big, I've interviewed and met with Ratan Tata, I have met Dr. Kalam, I have met, Deepak Parekh, I've met everybody. And no matter how big they are in what walk of life, whether it's Sachin, Amir, whoever, the fact is that they always keep it simple and they know themselves the best. So I think that if you know, in all aspects of life, if you know who you are and what you're capable of, that is truly the journey that you need to be on. And the rest of it sort of flows because people react to you depending on yourself and how you are as a person. So yeah, I think that's what I hoped at least people understood, that keep it simple and be truthful and be honest, and the rest will follow.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for giving your time. Thank you, ma'am.
Take care. Bye.